We bring you this Fox News alert, some stunning new twist on day 11 of the search for Nancy Guthrie. Investigators racing against the clock, and they returned to both Nancy and Annie Guthrie's homes this afternoon. Two officials were seen leaving Annie's house with a bag in their hand, and they checked the mailbox as well. Now, every second counts as they try to track down this person you are seeing on the screen, caught on camera on Nancy Guthrie's porch the night she went missing. Last night, a person was detained for questioning but has been released. However, FBI Director Kash Patel says the Bureau is looking at multiple persons, plural, of interest.
I do believe we are looking at people who, as we say, are persons of interest. But as you know, with any investigation, you are a person of interest until you're either eliminated or you're actually found to be the culprit or the culprits involved. And that's the stage we're at right now.
Let's go to Alicia Acuna, who is on the ground in Tucson. Alicia.
Hi, Kaylee. The New York Post is now reporting that the FBI has found a black glove about 1.5 miles from Nancy Guthrie's home, and it was found in the shrubbery. There was a search today, and I'll get into that in just a moment. But for right now, I want to discuss a little of the activity that our cameras caught at Annie Guthrie's home. They were here for just a short period of time. There were a couple of hours ago, an unmarked SUV pulled up. Two men walked inside. They were there for maybe 15 minutes. They appeared to be agents of some sort, but it's also possible they are part of the Guthrie private security. Our producer shouted questions, didn't get any answers, but one of the men carried out a couple of bags from the home, and the other was wearing latex gloves. We've reached out to the FBI for confirmation on whether this was part of the investigation or something else. Earlier today at Nancy Guthrie's home, this man drove up to the property and left some sort of signage with a sheriff's deputy. Interestingly, he told a local TV station he was a private investigator for the family. This is the first time we've heard of the Guthries hiring a private investigator. Also today, we have video of FBI agents who were out today in the area just to the north and surrounding streets of Nancy's house. The Bureau confirming in a statement this morning, numerous FBI agents were conducting an extensive search along multiple roadways in the Catalina foothills area related to the Nancy Guthrie investigation. Last night, law enforcement briefly detained a man in Rio Rico, Arizona, south of Tucson. Matt Finn reports the FBI tells Fox News Carlos Palazuelos was not pinpointed solely off of that footage of a person on Nancy Guthrie's Nest Cam. Kaylee, Palazuelos tells Fox News that the FBI took his phone, may still have it, so we will await updates on that as well. Kaylee?
Alicia, thank you. Let's bring in former NYPD inspector and current Fox News contributor Paul Mauro in Tucson. Paul, I'm looking at this New York Post reporting. Apparently, there's images, according to the New York Post, of these investigators pulling the glove, the black glove, which resembled that in the video, from the shrubbery. Curious, is this connected to that Catalina foothills search? And second, can they get DNA off this glove?
Well, if it is, in fact, one of the gloves that the perpetrator wore at the scenes, then, of course, this would be a very, very big break because of the possible DNA analysis that we've talked about, Kaylee. You and I have talked about it many times. It's the question I asked at the press conference, which was, will you use the IgG DNA? That is the DNA that is familial, and so you have a much, much greater shot of getting to somebody who is linked to your suspect as opposed to a one-to-one hit, which is a very, very remote possibility. That said, the idea that they've only found one glove, it's pretty far from the scene, and the fact that somebody who was very clearly extremely cautious, he was robed up foot to head to make sure. In fact, I think he was had two hoods on just to make sure he didn't leave any DNA. He throws one glove out the window as he leaves the scene. It's a little bit much to believe at this point, but perps do crazy things that are inexplicable, and this would be a big, big break, and I'm sure it is related to that search.
Paul, thank you. One last question, and then we're going to broaden it out in the table here. There was some new reporting from Matt Finn that the look of the individual alone in the camera is not what led to the detainment of Carlos. I would have suspected that because they would have had to have a search warrant. Any indication as to what the other information was?
Not really. I'd heard that there is, potentially some digital stuff. This is what I'm reading into that. He's a delivery driver. And they asked him, in fact, Matt Finn asked him directly, have you delivered to the house in question? And he said something like, I very well might have. So I had a guess, and I'm guessing, I would think that they did some sort of a digital search relative to either people who have delivered to that place or people who have maybe put it into a mapping service, one of the mapping apps, to see if they can find their way to it. And they might have got a hit on him. And so the confluence of those factors got them enough to get over the hump for the federal search warrant. But remember something else, too. You know, in a ransom situation, a kidnapping, there's probable cause and then there's probable cause. And I would argue that in a pressured situation like this, where a woman's life is on the line, that bar comes down a bit. So we do have to bear that in mind. But it sounds like there was more than one factor. A couple of things likely came together. But as of now, he's not under arrest.
Dana, I mean, I'm looking at this picture of the glove at the New York Post, and we hope it's the perpetrator's glove, but we've seen what we thought was a detainment that led to nothing.
And it's also 11 days later. So, I mean, well, if that's the case, then they just found it. That would be kind of strange. But they haven't had bad weather either, so that might be the case. I would also ask this, Paul, can you help us make sense of these ransom notes that are going to TMZ? On Newsroom this morning, Harvey Levin said an hour and a half ago, we just got another one. But it was somebody who said that they know who the kidnappers are, but they're also asking for Bitcoin. And maybe that all rings true to some. And for me, I find it just a little bit hard to believe. But I wonder if you have a better sense of that.
No, I'm with you. You know, the audience for this case is unfortunately global. And so you're talking about millions of people who are following this, and all you need is a few knuckleheads who want to pile on. The even first two that had the Bitcoin wallet, the first two emails, had the patina of a ransomware case to me. It's very similar to how the ransomware gangs operate from behind Russia, and they're impossible to get to. And the fact that they were just so completely unwilling to provide any signs of life, any images, something from inside the house that they saw, because the stuff that they did provide was very, very thin and potentially gleanable, I would argue, from media reports. So I lean against all of these letters until I'm shown otherwise. I don't know why they put the money into the account, maybe to just see if it works, maybe to see if it provided an alert to him. And so somehow or other they could see a packet move to him that said, hey, there's money in the account, some deep dive thing that they did in the cyber world. I don't see how $300 would entice him to come forward and smoke him out. And there's also the possibility that it is bad guys, as I said, who are normally stealing identities and stuff, and they just went back to business as usual, and the $300 that's in the account is them selling identities because their attempt at this ripoff didn't work.
Jesse.
Paul, again, we're seeing investigators back at the sister's house, and we're seeing images of them taking things from the house. At this point, after a week and a half, what items could they possibly be taking away from Annie's house?
Yeah, it's a good question because they've been all over the place there. I actually lean towards it being investigators that have been hired by private security, that have been hired by the Guthrie family. Here's why. The information we've had on the scene here, they haven't been in that house in a good while now. And my information is that they are outside the city someplace, but not that far off. They don't want to show themselves. They don't want to come into town. They know all the media is out here. And so my read is that those are people who are just, they send people in to get supplies for them and they, clothes and stuff. And they are being very cautious in wearing gloves and using plastic bags because they just want to make sure that there's no argument later that they in any way tainted something that could presumably become part of the case. Now, again, that's an assumption. You know, I'm not sure about that. If that is still an evidence search team, it strikes me that it was fairly casual. You send two people back, they go in, they're in there for not all that long, and then they come out with a couple of plastic bags. That's not really how you're gathering evidence. You know, there are forms, there are envelopes that it goes in, that you seal it, it stays in there. You don't walk out casually swinging a plastic bag. So, you know, I lean against it at this point, still being evidence collection. But anything's possible in this case. It's been very, very surprising.
Greg.
So, Paul, I want to revisit my strategy to solving this case, and that would be having the least likely suspect, Savannah Guthrie, offer to do a polygraph, which will then put necessary pressure on others inside and outside the circle to do the same. Since no one has been ruled out, it's one step forward in ruling in. And anybody who says no or bristles looks unusual. What do you say to that?
Well, my understanding as of now is that they haven't done anything relative to a polygraph. I'm not sure we would have necessarily have heard, but I think we would, the way things have been going out here. And as we all know, it's not admissible in court, but it can be a pointer. I said, look, I am surprised a little bit that we haven't heard to that kind of thinking, more in terms of a reward, to put pressure on somebody who is potentially around the perpetrators to come forward. And I understand what you're saying. If one of the primary victims here says, okay, I'll volunteer to do this, let's see what happens with others. I get that. You're trying to smoke people out that might be close to the situation. But I think a good way to smoke out people that are close to the situation is to offer a life-changing a reward. I understand we don't want to incentivize people to kidnap in the future. Of course, I get that. But at this point, with an 84-year-old woman missing for a week and a half, I think you're at the point where you got to do something that's fairly extreme. So as far as Savannah doing that, obviously that's going to be her personal call. I don't know if they've discussed it. It may argue that inside the family, they are perfectly happy with the way things have gone in terms of the investigation. Obviously, they haven't gotten their mother. But I'm going to the idea that the family has been cooperative, and inside the family, they must feel that everybody is being forthright, and that's not where the investigation should go.
Kennedy.
Paul, we heard a lot yesterday the phrase tickling the wire, which is a phrase that I am unfamiliar with, but apparently is very common in law enforcement lexicon. So we have this big break in terms of the picture, the images, the video that we saw yesterday. Did that tickle the wire? Was there a bombardment to the two phone numbers we have up on the screen constantly? And how do they sift through the information to actually find those persons of interest?
Yeah, so generally tickling the wire is used in the wiretap context. You have a wiretap that isn't really producing a whole heck of a lot, and you have an investigation ongoing, and you do something outside the wiretap to get the bad guys talking about what happened on the wire so that you can hear their reaction and you move the whole thing forward. And that you usually do that with an undercover or an informant who is under your control. In this case, it's a slightly different context. Tickling the wire here, I think the closest thing to that sort of analogy is what they did with the Bitcoin, assuming that that was, in fact, the FBI to put the $300 in. Like I said, I think they were probably hoping to tickle the Bitcoin wire, so to speak, to get him either reaching in for the paltry amount of money, or maybe, as I said, seeing an alert go out or seeing him log in to check if it's there or something like that, give them a data point to work with. And the other thing, of course, that could tickle the entire wire of the investigation writ large was the release of those videos. And they had to do that. And understand, that's not an easy decision to make. We've seen it in a number of cases recently, like Tyler Robinson. They didn't want to necessarily put out that video and alert him that, hey, we have images of you, whoever did this to Charlie Kirk. But they made the mature decision to say, yeah, people are going to say we couldn't solve it, the public solved it. Who cares? You put it out if it's going to end this thing. They made that decision in the Charlie Kirk case. They did the right thing here. They had good imagery. They put it out. Hopefully, they can get more. There's an argument that what they did here, they're going to be able to continue to go forward with, do more of decoding of those code packets that ultimately produce video that they were able to recover from the cache in the Wi-Fi. And maybe you're going to get more from that camera. Maybe you could get audio. Nest cameras have audio. You could hear his voice. There's other cameras there. Maybe some of those other cameras are going to produce. We know at least one other camera alerted at some point after that camera. I'm sure they're scraping hard at that. This stuff's not easy. Google did it in 10 days. I'm sure they put their best foot forward, went at the thing that they thought was going to be most productive. But now I'm sure they're trying to get at other stuff. And so, yeah, and it may tickle the wire of somebody coming forward and saying, I see enough of that guy's walk, which is always very distinctive. That's what I'd be interested in. If we could get, even if he's all masked up, if we get 3 seconds of him really walking clearly, I think that there's a very good chance you're going to get somebody to say, I absolutely know who that is.
Let's hope we get that. Paul, thank you.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.